We'd come first and second in the Olympic Games, and that was the absolute pinnacle of performance in our sport. And then all of a sudden, you're way better known for failing dramatically in another race a few weeks later because it was a failure. The goal was to win the race there, Jonny to win the world title, and it didn't happen. What an idiot. He should have just paced this a little bit better. He was definitely going to win. For a long time afterwards, both of us really struggled with the fact that that was a thing that people knew us for.
How did you sort of process that? Alastair, welcome to High Performance.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I want to start with a quote from your brilliant book, Relentless. I'm petrified by what awaits, not by potential failure, but just by retirement. You've just recently announced your retirement, so how are you feeling?
Well, yeah, I wrote that, I think 4 or 5 years ago now. And yeah, fast forward those years and I decided to retire from sport. Officially retired 2 months ago. At the moment, I feel really, really good about it, to be honest. Sport has been my life. I've been a professional athlete for 18 years. I'm 36 now, so it's half my life. I was taking sport seriously before then. So on one hand, it is an enormous shock. Imagine a life where the vast majority of days, 75% of those days, I've got up to go swimming in the morning. The other days, I've got up to do something else, literally thousands of times. And all of a sudden, that's not there. So on one hand, that structure, routine, regimen, the goals, the processes are not there. But on the other hand, the opportunities that's opened up, the time, the opportunity to do sport for enjoyment and different challenges, the opportunity to use that focus and energy to do other things, and it's all amazing.
Well, we're going to come on and talk about that focus and energy that you had, but I'm interested in, when did you know it was time to step away from elite sport?
I don't think there was a definitive moment. I think, I can make anecdotes up about definitive moments, but I think over the period of the last couple of years, it came on me slowly. That brilliant quote of going bankrupt slowly and then all at once. But yeah, I think it came on me slowly. I think at the beginning of last year now, 2024, I was probably 50-50. And then I just got more sure, I think, throughout the year. And I just knew it was time. It's funny, isn't it? Sometimes I'm a very analytical, kind of objective person and decision maker. That's the processes I go through. But I just felt it was a very instinctive decision, and it was the right thing in the right time. One of those anecdotes that I like to tell that kind of isn't true, but has an element of truth to it, is through the work with working with the International Olympic Commission. I was in Paris at the Olympic Games, and I stood on the pontoon next to all the competitors who were about to start and dive into the river. And I was stood there before the horn goes off, which is the most nerve-wracking part, I think, of any sporting competition, just before you start. Yeah. And I thought, thank goodness I'm here, stood here, spectating. And I definitely thought, I think that's quite telling, because I wouldn't have thought that 10 years ago.
There's that quote though, isn't there, that athletes die twice, one when you retire and then when you die for real. So how have you gone about making that transition from being Alistair Brownlee, the triathlete that you're so synonymous with, to being Alistair Brownlee, the man?
I think two things. For me, my identity was never completely tied to being a triathlete, but I think I always actively tried to have lots of other things going on, whether that's work with the foundation, writing a book, things in business, things in sports administration. I actively sought out kind of opportunities and other areas of interest. And then on a similar vein, I've been preparing for retirement for probably, the last 5 or so years. And, not necessarily actively thinking I'm going to retire on this date. I want to have this opportunity lined up, but I've been very much knowing I'm going to retire at some point in this time frame. I'm the kind of person that needs something to do. I've got this pathological fear of kind of having nothing to do and, getting out of bed, and by 11 o'clock you think, I don't know what to do with the rest of the day, head down the pub. I need kind of structure and I need things that keep me interested and engaged. So I've been able to kind of plan and engage in some of those things, experience those things, kind of play at things in some ways to work out what I enjoy and what inspires me.
See, I'm really interested by that bit of having like an eclectic mix of different interests. So because like there's a common narrative in lots of elite sport that your focus needs to be singular. You need to be like dead-eyed on what your targets are. and yet you're advocating having a range of different interests. What did that do for you?
Yeah, I think having a range of interests is really important. I think from a sporting point of view, being able to have a kind of being able to step off the sporting field and have other focuses, I think is really important. So you're not tied to your sporting identity. We all know a lot about that and the impact that has when you're injured or ill, and the psychological issues you can have. But also I think to give you perspective. And of course, that doesn't mean that you can't be hyper-focused when the time comes. I mean, for me, that really is the essence of performing high performance in sport. What mental state do I need to be when it really matters? And that's in competition, sometimes in training. And then outside of that, what can you do to increase the focus in that moment, and give you perspective and give you other interests and help you recover and all those things.
So can we talk a little bit about your background then? Because you're synonymous, as well as synonymous with being a triathlete, synonymous with being from Yorkshire as well. It's almost like your background and your performance is stitched into the environment. Would you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, I had a very kind of normal background in lots of ways, a very amazing kind of stable family life. I'm one of three brothers. My mum and dad and the three of us lived in Leeds, or just kind of on the edges of Leeds in Yorkshire. Mum and dad were very active. My mum had been a swimmer in her past, and my dad had been a runner. And I think they just encouraged us, I think firstly to try all sports, which I think is fundamentally so important for young people. Get exposure to everything. You don't know what might inspire you. And that's very much our philosophy with the foundation. Expose as many people to activities as you can, but also just a love of the outdoors and being active. My memories is every single weekend being dragged out sometimes before I learned to enjoy it, dragged out to walk over the moors here, or walk up this hill, or cycle here. And I think possibly more than the sport, actually, that love of being outside and activity was really crucial. Growing up, I very much, my parents and focus was academic and not so much sport. I loved my sport. I was doing swimming, cycling, running, triathlon by the time I was in my teens, starting to train quite hard. Wasn't particularly good at it to start with, but slowly got better through my teenage years, and trained a lot with my younger brother, Jonny, who was following a very similar path, and he was most of the time the perfect training partner, and we got on amazingly. Sometimes we didn't. And that was it, really. I lived a very kind of, I think, simple life of going to school, working really hard. That's probably another thing I would say. The philosophy of my mum and dad was kind of, it doesn't really matter what you do, just do it to the best of your ability. Be good at what you do, work hard at it, focus. A very kind of meritocratic, hardworking, kind of good northern outlook, I guess.
Brilliant. But let's talk about the hard work stuff, because some of the stories about your childhood, that you choosing to forgo getting on the school bus, tell us a little bit around some of those examples of what hard work looked like.
At the time, I definitely didn't see training as hard work, although maybe I'm looking at it through rose-tinted glasses. But I worked out relatively early on that endurance sport is basically a capacity game. The more of it you can do, the more load you put through in your body, the bigger response over a period of time. And so I was actively trying to work out how I could fit the most training in a day. And at some point, and I've always been really into efficiency and making the best use of time. And I was thinking, I'm sat on this school bus for 40 minutes a day, or whatever it is. I could be using that time to commute. Anyway, took a bit of time, I think, to convince my mum that it was okay. And I think the first few times my dad actually cycled almost all the way with me and then all the way back to make sure it was okay. But yeah, it's one of those fascinating things in life, by the school that my parents sent me for zero sporting reasons at all, completely for academic reasons, was that it turned out that firstly, I could cycle mostly there up a really nice traffic-free canal towpath every morning.
Right.
And secondly, had a teacher there who took people out running every lunchtime. And, those were two massive factors in my sporting development.
And you talk in your book around a concept called the Kohler effect that you've just articulated there. Would you tell us a bit more around what you understand that to be?
The essence of the Kohler effect is that
this episode is brought to you by Payhawk, a company we think are great partners for high growth and scaling companies. Have you been in a world of wasting countless hours on expense reports or playing spend approval ping pong? Well, those days are long gone, thanks to Payhawk. No more receipt chasing or drowning finance teams in paperwork. You can now focus on what truly matters, which is growing your business. And what is Payhawk's brilliance? Well, they help companies create what they call a healthy spend culture, so their customers don't stress about how much they can spend, where or when, because it's all pre-agreed. Talk about a weight off their shoulders. So if you're curious to see Payhawk's magic in action, their company cards app and spend management platform could revolutionize your business. Visit the link in the description to book a demo, and don't forget to mention you heard about them on the High Performance Podcast. And of course, huge thanks to Payhawk for supporting our show. Here's to smarter spending and time back in all our pockets.
the essence of the Kohler effect is that you're a kind of product of the people you surround yourself with on many different fronts. For me, I think one of the great questions I think in where sporting success comes in people is how much down to pure chance. You come across great people who support you on that journey, and that's luck, or you choose people. I was very fortunate from a young age to be surrounded by all kinds of amazing people, and I think I got a lot of motivation and my inspiration from people who were close to me. It could have been someone who was a bit older than me at the swimming club who I respected, or a coach, a teacher that took me out running every lunchtime. Incredible kind of dedication to the cause. I met two fantastic coaches when I was about a 14-year-old in Malcolm Brown and Jack Maitland. I had a great bunch of friends who also cycled and ran and would go out and explore on the weekends. So through a bit of luck, through maybe a very little bit of planning, I did kind of surround myself, I think, in an environment that was just very conducive for training a lot.
You've spoken about different drives, and you're renowned as being one of the hardest working athletes, someone that seems to have that constant, unerring drive to improve and to get better. What was it that drove you?
I don't think you can ever answer this question completely kind of analytically. I think ultimately it's lots of things at different times. I think in some ways I was just driven because I just was. I had some kind of innate drive, and whether that is really innate or kind of a nature nurture, or whether it came from my parents telling me, it doesn't matter what you do, just do it well. But on an individual session, one of the things I really learned from writing the book was, I think the people who are very successful over long periods of time in all kinds of disciplines. I spoke to Ronnie O'Sullivan, snooker, AP McCoy as a jockey, and loads of other people, is that they work out what they need. They work out what they need to motivate them in that particular setting to do what they need to do on that day, and that could be many different motivations, even in the same session. So for me, sometimes I would go swimming in the morning. It'd be part of my life. So the alarm goes, I'm getting up, and you motivate yourself to get out of bed to get a cup of tea. And then you motivate yourself to get in the car, and then you motivate yourself to get out the car and on the pool because you're going to interact with your friends. So, there's a social motivation there, and then you motivate yourself to get in the pool. And, in the space of that 30, 40 minutes, there could be 10 different forms of motivation. And then finally you're racing up and down. I'm racing Jonny in the lane next to me, and that's a competitive motivation. And that was my way of getting me from, if you sat in bed thinking, should I go swimming or not this morning? Or should I go, I'm going to be racing up and down the lane as hard as I possibly can in 40 minutes time. You're just never going to get out of bed. So yeah, you have to break it down and find what motivates you for those particular moments.
So let's fast forward a little bit then through your school career, because you start off, you finding the different motivations, you start to progress and get better. And at the same time, you find yourself being offered a place to study medicine at Cambridge University. It's the enviable position for so many students. You chose to walk away from it. Tell us about that.
It was obviously a very hard decision. I loved academics and I loved studying. I really enjoyed studying sciences at school, and obviously my mum and dad encouraged that, and at the same time I was encouraged to, I guess, research and read about the science that interested me, which was, the human body and exercise science, and so that that was a real passion of mine. I applied to study medicine and had a place to study medicine at Cambridge, and it was a really difficult decision because at the very same time, all of a sudden my sporting career had taken off. I'd kind of gone from the year before, I think I was 40th or 50th in the junior world champs, to that year I won the junior world champs. And I think that was weeks before I was going to start going to university, and all of a sudden, I could have sponsors, so I could actually make a living out of triathlon, which I didn't know was possible really before that. The Olympics, this is the end of 2006, so the Olympics are less than 2 years away, and we know that the Olympics are going to be in London in 6 years' time. So it was a tough decision, and my dad ultimately said, "You've got this amazing opportunity, you should at least go and try it." And he definitely thought if I got there, that would be it. I would commit, but at the same time, it was absolutely the right thing to do, because I know I did go and try it. It was a fantastic opportunity. I would have loved to carry on. I kind of always had in the back of my mind I'd probably go back and study medicine at some point. But it also made me really sure that triathlon was absolutely the thing that I wanted to do. And when I made the decision to focus on my sport, I was making a really positive, proactive decision that I could be doing something else amazing, and I better make the most of the opportunity to do sport.
So what advice would you give to anyone that might be in a position where they've got two choices and wondering what path to tread down?
I think it's a very difficult position to be in. So, don't be afraid to struggle with that situation, especially where it is one of those life kind of determining things potentially. However you look at it, that definitely was. Don't be afraid to struggle. I think don't be afraid to try and make it as analytical as you can. Write pros and cons, but ultimately it has to be a intuitive decision. There isn't going to be a way to objectively kind of decide. I always found that by going out running and thinking about it in a kind of clear headspace environment, everything becomes much clearer. For me, that was just a very instinctual decision, and I made it. And thankfully, looking back, it turned out it was a good one, but it could have not been.
So you did make the decision, you did commit and go all in. What was it that you think gave you your edge as a competitor?
I was absolutely determined to be the very best I could be. So I think from a physical point of view, I worked out early a way of training that suited me, and I constantly innovated to try and add a bit more training here, do something slightly different, try if something worked out or not, to really optimize what I was doing. And I think psychologically, from maybe innately or maybe from my upbringing, I was just in a good position to enjoy the training, be motivated to do the training, enjoy competition as well, and not get overwhelmed by that.
Can we talk a little bit about the overlap between the physical and the mental? Because you were an athlete renowned for burying yourself, and your definition of burying yourself is where you train until your muscles burn, your eyes bulge, and your eardrums are fit to burst. Tell us about going into that place of such pain.
Pain is, associated with endurance sport, isn't it? And there's very different amounts of pain. I didn't do super short things, but you can put yourself through horrendous pain for a minute. For me, at the end of a triathlon, or if you're doing some short reps in swimming or on the running track, or you also can be doing an Ironman distance triathlon and your legs really hurt and you've got 25k left to run, and you're going to be doing it for the next hour or hour and a half, and so that kind of long chronic pain is different. And they're very, very different things, and I think people are probably optimized for different types of discomfort maybe. I think you do have to get some kind of satisfaction from it. I remember very clearly being injured and not being able to train hard, and in the first session back after a few weeks when I could really push, and getting to the end of a few reps where I've really pushed and you're in that pain, just feeling immense satisfaction from pushing myself that hard. So I think there must be something kind of psychologically in there where I enjoyed that and either did or learnt to have satisfaction from pushing myself, as crazy as that sounds. But I think you should also say that in endurance training, for endurance sport, the vast majority of the training you're doing isn't to that level of intensity. The vast majority in a week where I was in big weeks could have been doing 20 sessions and 35 hours plus up to 40 hours of training. The amount of time you're in that kind of discomfort could be less than an hour. So even less sometimes. So the very extreme discomfort doesn't happen very often, and it shouldn't actually, because one of my other big kind of, I think, tenets of training for endurance is all about sustainability, repeatability over a long period of time. So whatever you do, you can't only do it once. You have to, can I do this session in this week for the next 6 months, because that's how you get better.
But then there's that famous incident in the 2010 World Triathlon Series where you push yourself beyond the physical pain barrier, where eventually your body just pulled the pin on you. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, I was running down through Hyde Park along the Serpentine this morning, actually, and I was kind of remembering about that and other things. And I remember I was having a really bad day, and I was just, since being young, I had done this thing where in really difficult situations where you're pushing yourself as hard as you can, I would only focus on a point on the back of someone's shoulder if you're running behind them, or a part of the bike if you're cycling behind them. And I would just completely focus on that point and take away everything else, and nothing else in the world matters in that moment. The only thing matters is that point doesn't get any further away from me. I remember running and just feeling bad from the first bit of the run, and you just get to the next corner. And I remember within the last few hundred meters of that race, and I was just focusing on this point, just get there, and then you can get around this corner and you can sprint, and you'll be at the finish. Hopefully you'll sprint around the guy who you're with, and I can win the race. And I saw the flags for the finish line, and the last thing I remember is thinking, they look quite a long way away, and my mind goes blank. And I then wake up in a hospital bed covered in ice and wires coming out of me, and I'd kind of got unconscious from pushing myself so hard and effectively overheating. You can push yourself that far. I don't advocate doing it, and you're pushing yourself at that point. You're going through a lot of warning signs.
Like what?
Well, just feeling really bad for a long period of time, obviously starting to feel hot, probably things like you're starting to get really bad stomach pain, like legs, muscles, your lungs hurting like nothing you've experienced over a long, not over 1 minute, but over kind of 10, 15 minutes, really, really pushing. Your core body temperature can get really, I think I was over 41 degrees, which, is like a crazy high core body temperature. And then it's a very dangerous situation. Fortunately, I had amazing care at the time, and I was cared for immediately by doctors and cooled down. But if you don't cool down fast, it's really dangerous, because your core body temperature goes high, your body shuts out its peripheral circulation, and actually your skin starts feeling cold, and that's when you're in a lot of trouble. And that's because your your peripheral circulation shut down, and so at that point your periphery of your body, your skin and subcutaneous tissue is been insulating your core, and you can just heat up and heat up. So you need to cool down people down quickly, or it can get very bad.
So we often hear that like the advice for all of us when we stretch our comfort zone is to be comfortable with the discomfort. What have you learned then between that distinction of being comfortable with the discomfort and actually pushing too far to that point of danger?
I know lots of endurance athletes who have been to that point, and everyone has a common issue afterwards where they feel they're not sure where that line is anymore between what's kind of safe pushing yourself, if there is such a word, but there is, pushing yourself as hard as you can and going too far. Everyone seems to happily find that line relatively quickly afterwards, to be honest. And for me, yeah, it was the same. I was physically unwell actually for probably a few weeks after that, and my body couldn't push like I'd like it to be able to. But I had no problem again pushing myself, and I've actually never done it since. Right. So I think you also probably need quite a lot of external as well as internal factors to push yourself that far. You probably need the right kind of weather conditions, warm, but in my experience, not too warm. So you don't start factoring in the warmth, potentially some GI problems, so you're not absorbing fluid like you'd normally. And I think you need to be exceptionally psychologically motivated. So there's no way on this planet I could do that in a training session or in a scientific lab. You need to be so motivated by the race around you.
So where would you draw the line at this win at all cost mentality then, that we often assume that elite sport demands of us?
Well, the win at all cost mentality is good, I think, until it puts, from a personal point of view, we're not talking kind of a wider societal point of view, is until it puts you in physical danger. And I think obviously that is the line. I mean, that's the question in sport. Not only is it the line in competition, because of course, if you conk out before the line, you're not going to win. So there's a pragmatical approach there. I wouldn't even, unless it was maybe the Olympic Games, I also wouldn't want to cross the line and end up in intensive care. Anyway, maybe I probably would for the Olympic Games, but apart from that, if that was the Faustian choice between those two things, no, for most races I wouldn't. And in training as well, training is about doing things consistently over a long period of time, and so by definition, you want to stay on the right side of the line of breaking yourself.
So your coach Malcolm Brown is an interesting character. In your book, there's lots of sort of little aphorisms that he tells you around. One of them is pressure is a privilege. How did that affect you when you were sort of in these races where it's acute, the pressure's acute, the competition's high? How did you sort of process that?
Yeah, the pressure is a privilege thing is something that I think I talked about with Malcolm when I was very young, and it's stuck with me ever since. Triathlon isn't a major sport, it's a relatively niche sport, and then all of a sudden around the Olympic Games, especially going into London, there is feels like tons of pressure. You go from no one knowing you or mostly what triathlon is to people asking you how the race is going and when you're going to win the Olympics, when you go and buy a pint of milk in the local shop. So there is a big change there. And I went from a relatively kind of unknown junior to winning the World Series and being the best athlete in the world and the one that everyone watched in a couple of years. So it was quite a steep learning curve and change in that time. At some point, Malcolm told me, it's different now. People are going to focus on you and look at you to win. That's a different and sometimes more difficult situation to be in than the one where you just turn up and no one expects anything of you. But it's also a privileged situation to be in because to be in that situation, it means something. It means that you've achieved something that so you deserve to be there. And I just always saw it in that light instead. So
in practical terms, for anyone watching this, then, Alastair, how did you learn to embrace it rather than fear it, then the pressure?
So 2025 is well underway, and I bet a lot of you like me have already started to make plans on how this can be the very best year yet. And for me, making it a great year revolves around some investment, but actually investing in myself physically and mentally. So the physical investment has been a sauna that I've just had installed at home, and already I'm absolutely loving it. But the mental investment is making sure that I take time to go travelling with my kids, Flo and Seb and Harriet, my wife, on those kind of memory-making holidays that last a lifetime. But obviously both of those goals centre around needing finance. The good news is though, that's where our new partner XTB comes in. They're dedicated to empowering you on your investment journey, and that's regardless of whether your horizon is short or long term. You can maybe buy stocks and ETFs commission free. You can invest passively with investment plans, open an ISA account, earn up to 4.75% interest on uninvested funds, and loads more. And the good news is it's so easy using their app. So just download the XTB app today or click the link in the description below to start making your money work for you in 2025.
Well, a very tangible anecdotal example, I like to use, the pressure for the London Olympics was enormous relatively for me. And I remember going down to the start of the race, feeling under enormous pressure, and then going out on the course to ride my bike, just check out the lap and check everything was working. And there were so many people there. And my first thought was, "Whoa, this is nerve-wracking." So many people just there expecting me to win this race. And then I just had this amazing a switch flipped, and I just realised, wow, all these people, or the vast majority of them, holding the Union Jacks. I'm not sure about the blokes with the Spanish flags, but the vast majority of them are here to support me and see me do well. And although that's a very external, kind of exogenous thing, internally, I just rationalized it and said, what is pressure? I mean, is this external thing? I'm just rationalizing it as a positive rather than a negative. And that, I know that's kind of the oldest trick in psychology of your thoughts are and your beliefs are what you make them to an extent. But it's a very easy thing to say, isn't it? And a difficult thing to do. And in that moment, that's how I rationalize it. And I guess a million other examples like that, I'd feel, or, that conversations put pressure on me. I'd say, it's either nice or maybe it gives me motivation or something else. And I think that's very much how I looked at it on a case by case kind of basis.
And what about the other line that Malcolm used to use to you, that you can believe you can win the Olympics,
but only by a stride? Yeah. So that was a great line. I was still young. I think London had just won the bid to hold the Olympic Games. So it's 2005, get the timeline right, and I'm 17. And at that point, I thought it's really cool that London's won the bid to hold the Olympics here, but I've got no chance of being there. And so it's irrelevant to me. I'm going to go and watch, and the Olympic Games are going to be in my home country. Even at that point, I think London felt a long way away, so it was hardly my home country. What Malcolm was saying was, you have to believe you can be there and winning the Olympics, but only by a stride. So it's going to be a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication, a lot of determination, and a bit of luck.
So break that down for us, because lots of people talk about you need to have belief. How do we go about acquiring belief?
Belief is very much a double-edged sword. You need the right amount of belief, in my experience, in the right ways, and not too much. It's actually easier to define what too much is than the right amount. And you define too much of aiming to achieve something that is absolutely, physically impossible. And that's bad because probably it's impossible. So you can kind of believe that on a superficial level. But when your convictions really push comes to shove, when you're doing that metaphorical training session in the snow early in the morning, and you need to draw on that as a sense of motivation, if you kind of in a deeper sense, know it's not possible. It probably doesn't exist. So, it's not going to happen. And then, of course, if you start getting to those those lines in the sand, and the achievement that you believe you can achieve doesn't happen, there's an enormous negative psychological effect on that. So, it needs to be relevant. Standard kind of goal setting. So how do you kind of set those goals, align them with your dreams to have belief in the right way? And I'm not sure I entirely have an answer for that. And the truth is, there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of young people out there that believe they could win Olympic golds or win the Premier League or whatever it might be, and it doesn't happen for them. But I think it could have been very possible. It just didn't work out, and hopefully that kind of level of belief provided a really deep source of motivation to get them a long way on that path anyway. And I think that's the key thing. And I'm actually not sure always how important belief is. As I said before, it's one source of motivation, I think, to draw on. When you later, kind of in my career, talking to people from reading the book, people's most sources of motivation can be incredibly diverse. It can be belief and goal setting and achievement driven, whether that's achievement driven, financial or kind of social status driven. It can be really superficial in a certain context of I'm doing this just to earn well or gain something. It can be more deep set, just a desire to do well or to prove something to people around you. It can be belief and goal driven. I actually don't think it really matters where people draw their motivation from. I think the important thing is they just know how to motivate themselves at the right time. So in all of those years, if to use that example of between a kind of maybe when the first sparks of I believe I can be at those Olympic Games and win, I bet the number of times I actually needed to draw upon that for a real motivation is quite low. Most of it was kind of lifestyle. I'd be motivated by social factors, motivated by competitive factors, racing Jonny next to me, and maybe only on the very, cold, dark days where I needed to get out and do a particular session. It's like, I'm doing this because I believe this is what I need to do to win the Olympic Games.
So tell us a little bit about your relationship with your brother then, because obviously he's not only a training partner, but he is a sibling as well. Tell us about that relationship.
So Jonny and me have been competitive since it's possible to be competitive, I think, as brothers that are 2 years apart. I don't know when that first happened, but I was probably 5 and he was 3, and we were playing, I don't know, football or something else in the garden and falling out about it. We were competitive about everything. Whether that was sports in the garden. My mum likes to say we were competitive about stacking the dishwasher. I don't know if that's true or a story. We would go on holiday and fall out over playing crazy golf and throw golf clubs at each other's head and everything, and never finished a game of Monopoly. All those things. But we, by our kind of late or mid-teens, we'd both really channeled everything into being the best triathletes we could. And we would be really competitive. We'd go out training together and just start racing. Over time, it wasn't like we sat down and had a specific strategy about it. We realised that we were massive assets to each other to be able to train with each other and push each other on across 3 sports. And we realised we couldn't do that every session that we were doing. Like I said, you could do a maximum of 20 sessions in a week. Tons, 35 plus hours of training. You can't race all of those hours. The philosophy is you do as much as you can, as easy as you can to drive the physiological adaptations you want. But when you do hard focus things, you go at a high intensity. And at that point, you could race and be competitive. So we kind of had these rules that, you only raced when it mattered and in training. And that was to both of our benefits.
And I've heard you talk about the incident once where you're racing with Jonny and he sort of gives you a tell. Would you explain that incident?
We were always winding each other up in some shape or form. And, you'd like do a training session and try and pretend that one was super easy, even though you were trying to keel over after the session. And when it came to racing, I mean, I was always pretty confident that I had the upper hand. But yeah, Jonny likes to use this particular example of me being kind of cutthroat and ruthless. And it was actually at the Olympic Games in Rio. We were in first and second place in the race. Absolutely perfect scenario with 5 kilometers to go of the run. And he's running behind me and he says to me, slow down, relax. And he says he's like thinking about our health and making it to the finish line in the hot conditions. Anyway, I heard this and I was like, straight away, this means I'm going too hard, sped up and dropped him and went on to win the Olympic Games.
And how did he respond to that afterwards?
It's given him a good story. But yeah, I think he still thinks that was some kind of mistake, to be honest.
Does he? So can I ask you then, because that edge of ruthlessness that you demonstrated there in that Rio Olympic final is one thing, and then there's the incident that I think you're going to be synonymous with for the rest of your life, which I'd like to show you if you don't mind. I'd like you to talk us through what was going on in this particular incident.
So yeah, this is an incident in Mexico. It's actually a few weeks after the Rio Olympic Games, and the kind of context is Jonny is going to be world champion. He's leading the race, and I'm running behind in second, third place with this South African guy who ends up winning. I run around the last corner and see Jonny at this point, who's just kind of collapsed against a volunteer. And my first thoughts are, oh no, I kind of know he was overheated. What an idiot. Like, why is he messed this up? And then within literally a split second, I decide to grab him and start running towards the finishing line. And then a few hundred meters later, I think, oh, this is further than I thought. We've got quite a long way to go here. And so I'm still dragging him. And I realized he can still get maybe the points he needs as long as we don't get caught and he gets across the finish line before me. So I decided to push him across the finish line. Poor Jonny collapses over the finish line and needs medical attention. And at this point, he's whisked off to the emergency medical room to get cooled down and get treated. But it was really bad. He was very kind of unwell for quite a long period afterwards.
Now, it might be a trick of my imagination on this, but when you push him over that line, I'm sure I see a shake of the head from you.
Yeah, well, I don't know what's that about. One of the things with explaining, and loads of people have obviously asked me why I did it, what was going through my mind in that moment, what was the decision-making process. In truth, it's the end of, I've just raced for nearly 2 hours in the hot sunshine, and I'm hot, absolutely the end of my physical ability. And if anyone's tried to do math sums while you're pushing yourself hard, I mean, try it next time. You just don't have the capacity to do it. It's really interesting. And you've got a second as I came around the corner to decide what to do and just decide to grab him. Yeah, I can't really say exactly what was going through my mind at that moment. I just did. But yeah, I remember thinking later on, it was a couple of minutes of running, I think, as we're running towards the finish line, thinking, yeah, firstly, what an idiot. He should have just paced this a little bit better. He was definitely going to win. Secondly, how far is the next person behind us? Because we can still get to the finish line before we get caught here. And I need to get Jonny there first.
So when you look back on it now, like, how do you reflect on that incident now?
Well, in lots of ways. For a long time afterwards, both of us really struggled with the fact that was the thing that people knew us for.
Sure.
And, we'd just, at the Olympic Games were a few months before, we'd come first and second in the Olympic Games, which for us is actually way more remarkable for two brothers to come first and second in an individual event. I actually don't know the stats on that, but I think it's hardly ever happened in individual events. So we're like, and obviously we're very performance driven, and that was the absolute pinnacle of performance in our sport. And then all of a sudden, you're way better known for failing dramatically in another race a few weeks later, because it was a failure. The goal was to win the race there, Jonny to win the world title, and it didn't happen. So it took us a while to kind of get our heads around that. And then, I think we realised that it struck a chord with people differently who wouldn't normally be into triathlon, that they were it showed them how tough it was, how on the edge professional sports people can be for things going wrong, as we've talked about. And I think what I like to take from it is that, you can be the most ruthless person in sport. In fact, sport does require that at the top level. It requires you to be incredibly selfish and incredibly ruthless, but that doesn't mean you need to be that person all the time. And sometimes things are more important than that. And sometimes just instinctively, without thinking about it, you do just need to help your brother out.
Yeah, I love that. So can we reflect on your career now then? Because like you say, it's been incredible. You and Jonny finishing 1 and 2, but winning double Olympic gold and world championships and all the other incredible achievements. There's a quote from you that said back in 2021 ahead of the Tokyo Games that I've got to make the most of it while I can. Do you feel you did make the most of it?
That is the question, isn't it? Out of all the questions you could ask me about my career in sport, that is the one, because ultimately that's all you can do. You're dealt a set of cards. How do you maximize your hand? As cliched as that sounds. I think ultimately I do. I'm very proud of what I achieved. Very happy with it. Got immense satisfaction from what I did. From being the probably 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old who didn't believe, firstly, that you could have a career as a professional athlete. Secondly, didn't believe I'd go to the Olympic Games. And thirdly, never dreamed I could win the Olympic Games twice. From that respect, for sure, I would have liked to have achieved more, won more races. Who wouldn't? Who in life wouldn't like to have been more successful? But that is life, isn't it? Finding satisfaction in what we do have and knowing that you did your best. I also think, quite often the other way of asking that question is someone asks, if you look back now, would you have changed anything? And I think my answer to that is a definite no, because I don't know how that would have affected anything along the way. And I would have not swapped winning anything else or hundreds of more races for winning the Olympics twice. So maybe that's a different way to answer it.
That's a lovely way to answer it. So when you lay your head on the pillow at night and you sort of play the highlights reel of your career, where does your brain take you to?
Do you know what? I think as quite often I probably never think about crossing the finish line, standing on the podiums, or very rarely. I actually think, and this sounds like something that someone would just say, but it's actually true. I remember really hard training days where I've got immense satisfaction from being out for long training days in the cold weather, or having a great ride or run with a bunch of my friends and training partners where we knew we were doing something good, or being away on camp and putting days and days of tough training together with no distractions and with a great bunch of people. Some of the times when two kind of like types of moments stick out. One is, like I said, getting a satisfaction from a particular session and knowing, everything's working exactly as it should be. That's rare in triathlon, where you know that you're swimming, cycling and running, everything's progressing nicely in tandem. But also ideas and innovations that I came up with when times where I thought, actually, I can do this differently, I can look at this differently, I can add a bit more training there. Well, at the simplest level, just discovering, actually, this is my training. I say at the simplest level in terms of innovation, it sounds very simple, but if you believe, the body is as simple as you put load through it and it responds to that and gets faster, fitter, stronger, you want to maximize your load. And so thinking, well, how can I maximize your load in this week? It's kind of a logistical problem when you think of it like that. can I add a bit more here or a bit more there? Can I swap things around? So I do a longer session here and a longer session there. They're actually, for me, they were the most significant innovations beyond, things that sound a bit more fancy.
But there's a theme throughout your whole career, Alistair, that I think makes you exceptional, which is somebody that was really responsible for your training load. You were responsible for walking away from Cambridge University. You were responsible for choosing to cycle to school rather than get the bus. That theme of responsibility runs all the way through your whole career.
Yeah, I think self-responsibility is really important in sport. In my experience, not everyone approaches it in my way. Some people like to hand over that responsibility to someone they absolutely trust 100%, and that's fair enough. For me, that responsibility always was on my shoulder. And there's many ways to think and discuss about why that was. Was it because there's some kind of control element there, or whether it's kind of an ego thing of you believe you're the best person to make that decision. I think for me it was mostly pragmatical. I knew that it was my body we're talking about. I knew it was my career. I knew that no one was as passionate about me and my performance as me. And I think that's the thing in sport. It's not only your career, it's your hopes, it's your dreams, it's your passion, it's your hobby, it's your social life, it's your health and well-being. It's all those things, and because of that, I believed I was best placed to make those decisions that affected that, and it was an immediate feedback. So if something went well in a race or badly, immediately I would think, why was that? Can I do something better now? Go away and get the best possible advice I could get on that issue, whether it's a training thing or a medical thing or a physiological kind of scientific thing. But ultimately then I would make the decision with the best advice I possibly could, implement it and carry on going through that process of iteration.
So now you are at this crux point where you're making a transition away from being a triathlete. Out of all the qualities, the skills and methods that you used as an athlete to get to the top, which of those are you going to take with you into this next stage that you think will be important?
I'm not entirely sure yet, because I'll see exactly what the next chapter of my life looks like. But I think a few of the really kind of key high-level things is, I think having a focus and a passion is really important. For me, having that North Star to drive you on is crucial. I think if you start from that position, that fact of self-responsibility, I think is really important. I think achievement comes from the belief that you're best placed to do that and make those decisions, but also there isn't a clock on something. That achievement is if it takes 24 hours in a day to do it, that's the work and effort you have to put in. But most importantly, finding really enjoying what I do. I think that's absolutely crucial. That real deep sense of enjoyment, but finding satisfaction in the process of doing it. I worked out very early in a sporting career that winning the race and standing on the podium was nowhere near the you didn't get the joy and happiness and satisfaction from that all the training deserves. You have to find that everyday satisfaction.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for coming and sharing some of these lessons from an incredible career, Alistair. It's been a real privilege. Can we go to some quickfire questions?
Let's do it.
So what are the 3 non-negotiables that you and everyone around you was expected to buy into?
Yeah, dedication, fun, and what would be the third? Innovation.
What advice would you give to a young Alistair just starting out?
Yeah, I'd just say believe in yourself and take time to enjoy it along the way.
What's your biggest strength and your greatest weakness?
I think my biggest strength is my determination and willpower, and my biggest weakness is my determination and my willpower.
So what would you say is the best piece of advice you've ever received, and why?
It's an easy, well, two bits. I'd say my dad's advice to follow your dreams was the best, equally with Malcolm's advice to say, believe you can win the Olympics, but only by stride.
Now, we've got an app with High Performance, Alistair, where our listeners have got the capacity to be able to identify daily habits that they do to help them move towards their own version of high performance. What habit do you have that has helped you on your own journey?
I don't know if it counts as a habit, but I think routine is absolutely everything. So I guess the habit would be, how well do I stick to my predetermined routine? And for me, that takes away a lot of the need for use of willpower to do hard things. You have to use it, if you're sat at home and you need to go to the gym and you've come home from work and it's 6 o'clock and I need to think like this now I'm retired. And you think, oh, should I go to the gym? Should I not? Yeah, that takes so much willpower to get you up off the sofa to the gym, et cetera, where you just don't give yourself the option. And that's how I functioned mostly. It's this morning, I get up, I'm going swimming. It's just what I do. And so form those habits in the routine and stick to it.
So what would you do for that? Would you lay out your kit the night before and things like that to be able to allow you just to roll into that autopilot?
Well, I think that's part of it. I think having a predetermined routine is the first step. And then the second step for me, I saw it as removing all the barriers possible to do that could be in the way to stop me doing what I needed to do. So the example is exactly that. Make sure your kit's ready to go so you can just grab the bag and get out the door. Make sure, for me, I had a working bike and warm and dry kit, trainers, helmets, everything ready to go next to the door so I could put it on and go out. Make sure I had a bike on the turbo trainer in case I was using that, ready to go. So I didn't need to spend 15, 20 minutes fiddling with it, making sure everything worked before I got on. They are all barriers to stopping me doing what I need to do, and take as many of those out as you possibly can.
Brilliant. And the final question then, Alistair, is what's your one golden rule to live a high performance life?
I think have a fixed routine that's sustainable, and most importantly, you get a lot of satisfaction in.
That's amazing. Thank you for coming and sharing the lessons from a lifetime at the edge.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Struggling to find the motivation? Try this instead.
Take it professionally, not personally.
Why are we postponing love and community and friendship?
I'm not worried if anyone fails, as long as we are changing things for the good.
To have those kinds of friendships, I think, are absolutely essential to being what we would call a high-performance human being.
Take back control over your happiness. Give the High Performance app a try, then see how you feel.